Hello everyone, tonight we are going to gently float back way back to a time when the Earth itself was a grumpy teenager, all volcanic acne, and a rather pungent atmospheric perfume. Picture this, you're not quite swimming more. Suspended in a murky, lukewarm bath that stretches to every horizon. The sky above is a hazy alien orange, and the only sound is a faint, primordial gurgle, like the planet's plumbing needs a good once-over. And just to set the mood, if you were actually there, in your current, rather unprimordial form, you probably wouldn't survive. Not for long, anyway. No Wi-Fi for starters. Tragic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone's tuning in from as we embark on these little nocturnal adventures. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You drift. There's no up or down that feels particularly urgent, just a gentle, almost imperceptible current nudging you along. The water isn't clear. It's a soupy broth teeming with minerals and chemicals that sting your eyes and leave a metallic tang on your tongue if you were unwise enough to taste it. Tiny particles dance in the faint, diffuse light filtering from that strange sky. You can feel the warmth of it, not a comforting warmth, but the oppressive heat of a planet still cooling its heels, its internal furnace still very much active. Volcanic vents on the distant unseen seafloor occasionally burp out plumes of superheated water rich in sulfur and other elements that would be instantly toxic to most life, you know. The air, if you could break the surface, and who knows what breaking the surface would even entail in this primordial state, wouldn't be a breath of fresh air. It's a cocktail of methane, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and water vapor, with barely a whisper of free oxygen. That life-giving gas we take for granted. It's a rare commodity here, a revolutionary concept yet to fully take hold. So you stay submerged, a foreign speck, in an ocean that is both cradle and crucible. Danger here isn't about teeth and claws, not yet. It's more insidious. It's the intense ultraviolet radiation from a young sun unfiltered by a proper ozone layer, scorching anything that dares to venture too close to the surface for too long. It's the sudden shifts in water chemistry, the unexpected release of a pocket of poisonous gas from the Earth's crust, or simply the relentless grinding pressure of an environment that is fundamentally hostile to complex, unprotected organic matter. You are in essence marinating in a planetary-scale chemistry experiment, and the results aren't guaranteed to be pleasant. But life, as they say, finds a way. And it has. Look closely at those shallow sunlit areas. If you can make them out through the haze, you might see peculiar dome-shaped structures layered like ancient stony cabbages. These are stromatolites, and they are some of the earliest superstars of life on Earth. An authoritative fact for you, these structures built by colonies of cyanobacteria, sometimes called blue-green algae, have been found in fossils dating back as far as 3.5 billion years. These tiny organisms were performing a miracle photosynthesis. They were taking sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide and producing food for themselves, and as a byproduct releasing tiny, almost insignificant puffs of oxygen. These weren't exactly party animals, more like the planet's first very dedicated and incredibly slow-growing accountants, meticulously adding oxygen to the atmospheric ledger. For billions of years they toiled slowly, painstakingly changing the world. This great oxidation event, as it's known, was itself a form of planetary peril for the anaerobic life that came before, as oxygen was toxic to many of them. And speaking of the water's appearance, here's an odd little fact for you. For a vast stretch of its early history, Earth's oceans were likely not blue but a pale, ghostly green. This was due to vast quantities of dissolved iron compounds. Only after the cyanobacteria pumped enough oxygen into the atmosphere and oceans did this iron precipitate out, settling to the seabed and eventually allowing the waters to clear to the familiar blue we know. So you're floating in a green alien sea. Spooky. As aeons drift by like the particles in the water around you, life becomes a little more ambitious. You might sense rather than see new forms appearing, especially in the later Precambrian. As you drift into the Ediacaran period, maybe 600 million years ago. These are the Ediacaran biota, and they are an enigma. Imagine quilted air mattresses, frond-like things anchored to the seabed, and strange, disc-shaped organisms. Some are tiny, some a meter or so across. They have no obvious mouths, no guts, no limbs. Think of it less as a creature feature and more like a very slow, very damp, very confusing art installation. With occasional, very mild peril. Were they dangerous? Probably not in an active sense. They likely absorbed nutrients directly from the water or grazed on microbial mats. But their sheer alienness is unsettling. Historians still debate whether the first complex life forms, those mysterious Ediacaran biota, were animals, fungi, protists, or something else entirely. A failed experiment in multicellularity, a completely different branch of life that ultimately hit an evolutionary dead end. Their presence, however, signals a shift. The world is no longer just the domain of single cells and bacterial colonies. Complexity is stirring. The dangers are still largely environmental, but the very definition of life is expanding, and with it the potential for new kinds of interaction, new kinds of competition. You feel a slight tremor in the water, a distant volcanic grumble, a reminder that this world is still raw, still forming. The water around you is a thin soup, and you are just a temporary inclusion observing the quiet, slow-motion genesis of a world that will eventually become much, much louder and far more actively dangerous. For now, though, the peril is in the silence, in the vastness, in the sheer, overwhelming alienness of it all. You close your eyes just for a moment, trying to absorb the sheer scale of time that has passed and is yet to come. You open your eyes, metaphorically speaking, of course, and the world has undergone a rather dramatic glow-up from its murky Precambrian phase. The water, while not exactly sparkling Evian, has definitely cleared from a thick pea soup consistency to something more akin to a slightly cloudy but passable broth. More of that strange orange-filtered sunlight penetrates these middle depths, dappling the seafloor below you in shifting ethereal patterns. The profound silence of earlier eons is also subtly different. It's not yet broken by the roars or screeches of massive beasts. We're not quite there yet. But there's an undercurrent of, well, busyness. A faint, almost imperceptible, scuttling, a subtle whoosh as something displaces water nearby, the tiniest clickings and scrapings. The planet has cleared its throat and is beginning to hum with nascent activity. The seabed itself is no longer just a canvas for microbial mats and those rather enigmatic quilted Ediacaran oddities you might recall. Now it's littered. Small shelly fossils are everywhere, tiny tubes, intricate cones, and curious cap-shaped shells. This is the small shelly fauna, a geological overture to the grand biological orchestra that's about to strike up with considerable enthusiasm. You feel a palpable sense of anticipation in the water, as if the earth itself has been holding its breath for an eternity and is just about to exhale a riotous cavalcade of new, experimental life forms. And then it happens. Not in a single, dramatic, Hollywood-style boom, but in what amounts to a geological blink of an eye, perhaps 20 or 30 million years, which for a planet that counts its birthdays in billions, is practically warp speed. This is the legendary Cambrian explosion, a period kicking off around 541 million years ago, when life apparently decided that its previous rather minimalist aesthetic was boring, and it was time to get really, really creative. It's as if someone threw open the evolutionary toy box and all the scattered bits and pieces spontaneously assembled themselves into the most wonderfully bizarre and varied creatures imaginable. An authoritative fact for you paleontologists widely recognize that nearly all major animal phyla, the fundamental blueprints for animal body plans from arthropods to chordates, our own distant relatives, made their first definitive appearance in the fossil record during this Cambrian period. It's an absolutely astonishing burst of evolutionary innovation, a biological Big Bang. You see them now, these new denizens crawling with newfound purpose, burrowing into the soft sediment, and some even making tentative, clumsy forays into actual swimming. Trilobites, those iconic, heavily armored pillbug-esque arthropods scuttle across the seafloor, their segmented bodies and newly evolved compound eyes a marvel of early biological engineering. They come in a bewildering array of shapes and sizes, some sleek and smooth, others extravagantly spiny, as if they couldn't quite decide on their prehistoric fashion statement for the season. Darling, are spikes in this eon, or are we doing minimalist chic? One might have debated with its trilobite acquaintance if they had the capacity for such sartorial concerns. Then there are the brachiopods, looking for all the world like antique fancy clams anchored in place and diligently filtering tiny food particles from the water column. And things as they are wont to do in prehistoric times get considerably weirder. Look over there, that peculiar creature is Wiwaxia, looking like a somewhat disgruntled spiky slug that went a bit overboard at the Paleozoic equivalent of a craft store and bedazzled itself with far too many protective scales and dagger-like spines. And then there's hallucigenia. Oh, hallucigenia. For a very long time, scientists couldn't even reliably figure out which way was up for this perplexing little critter, or which appendages were its legs and which were its defensive spines. Its name quite fittingly comes from its dreamlike, almost hallucinatory appearance. And here's an odd little fact for you. When Hallucigenia sparsa was first reconstructed in the 1970s from fossils found in the Burgess Shale, paleontologists depicted it walking rather unsteadily on its stiff dorsal spines with its delicate tentacles waving uselessly in the air. It took decades and the discovery of more complete and better preserved fossils to realize they had it completely upside down, and for good measure back to front. The tentacles were actually its legs equipped with tiny claws, and the legs were formidable protective spines. Talk about a truly awkward first impression at the Cambrian coming out ball. The very fabric of life, its fundamental nature, has undergone a profound transformation. Before, in the Ediacaran, it was mostly about soft, squishy bodies. Now it's all about the armor, the shells, the robust exoskeletons. Why this sudden, almost frenzied biological arms race? Well, that brings us to a pivotal development, the rise of effective dedicated predation. As new and improved sensory organs evolved, like those first true eyes, which started as simple, light-sensitive spots on cells and rapidly diversified into more complex image-forming structures, creatures could find each other and interact with each other much more easily. And if you can be found, you can unfortunately be eaten. Or if you're the one doing the finding, you can do the eating. This dynamic created immense and relentless evolutionary pressure. Get a shell, or get eaten. Grow some nasty spines, or get eaten. Learn to burrow quickly, or get eaten. It was a tough, unforgiving neighborhood, this Cambrian sea. Historians still debate what precisely kicked off this evolutionary extravaganza, this biological Cambrian bloom. Was it a significant rise in atmospheric and oceanic oxygen levels, finally providing enough energetic fuel for larger, more active bodies and metabolic processes? Was it the evolution of key developmental genes, the so-called HOX genes, that act as master controllers for body plans, allowing for a greater range of more complex anatomical structures to arise? Or was it, as many paleontologists now strongly suspect, the rapidly escalating predator-prey dynamics themselves? A kind of evolutionary feedback loop where new defenses spurred ever more sophisticated new offenses and vice versa in a relentless cycle. The truth, as is often the case in such grand scientific mysteries, is likely a complex interplay of all these factors, and perhaps others we haven't yet fully grasped. And speaking of offenses, you suddenly feel a distinct shift in the water, nearby a more deliberate, purposeful movement. Something considerably larger is cruising in your general vicinity. This isn't one of the humble grazers meticulously scraping algae or a passive filter feeder waiting for dinner to drift by. This, my friend, is Anomalocaris. Its name translates rather unglamorously to abnormal shrimp, and it is without a doubt the apex predator of its time, the undisputed school bully of the Cambrian seas. Try to imagine a creature stretching up to a meter, perhaps even 2 meters in length. In a world largely populated by creatures the size of your thumb or smaller, this makes Anomalocaris basically a prehistoric leviathan. It boasts large, stalked compound eyes, providing it with excellent, perhaps even 360-degree vision. It possesses a pair of formidable spiny grasping appendages at the front of its head, perfectly designed for snagging unsuspecting smaller prey. And its mouth, is a bizarre circular pineapple ring-like structure, armed with sharp, overlapping tooth-like plates which could constrict and crush the protective shells of its unfortunate victims. You watch mesmerized and slightly horrified as one of these Cambrian kings zeroes in on a plump, unwary trilobite. There's a surprisingly swift pursuit, a dexterous snatch with those spiny arms, and then a series of distinct, crunching sounds that echo faintly through the water. Dinner, it would seem, is served. Some paleontologists even theorize that Anomalocaris might have been a bit of a picky eater, perhaps preferentially targeting the softer, unarmored parts of its prey, or specializing in particular species. The very existence of Anomalocaris and other smaller but still significant predators like the early chelicerates, very distant ancestors of today's spiders and scorpions, changed everything. Life was no longer just about passively absorbing nutrients from the surrounding water or placidly munching on microbial mats. It was now about active hunting, strategic stalking, and equally active, desperate evasion. Agility, speed, camouflage, and effective weaponry, both offensive and defensive, became paramount for survival. The Cambrian seas were a dynamic high-stakes crucible, forging the basic body plans and ecological relationships that would shape the entire future trajectory of animal life on this planet. Some of these Cambrian evolutionary experiments were frankly a bit out there, almost comically so. Creatures like Opabinia boasting 5 prominent eyes on stalks and a long, flexible hose-like proboscis tipped with a grasping claw. It looks like something designed by a committee that had perhaps indulged in a bit too much fermented primordial algae. Needs more eyes, I'm telling you. One of them probably slurred with conviction. And definitely a grabby thingy on a long, flexible tube. You feel a strange, vicarious sense of vulnerability. Even though you're merely an intangible observer, the sheer intensity of this new, vibrant world is palpable. The relatively peaceful, if somewhat bland and monotonous, Ediacaran garden party has been decisively replaced by a dynamic, dangerous, and dazzlingly diverse arena. The rules of the evolutionary game have been irrevocably altered, and the stakes are now higher than ever before. The era of the squishy passive floater is well and truly over. The age of biting, crunching, chasing, and active pursuit has well and truly begun. You can almost hear the tiny, high-pitched screams of protest if only trilobites had been physiologically capable of screaming. The vibrant, sometimes frankly weird chaos of the Cambrian slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, begins to settle into something a little more organized, perhaps. The waters around you seem to deepen, the light filtering down from above, taking on a richer, more azure hue. You've drifted forward in time into the Ordovician period, which kicked off around 485 million years ago. The evolutionary party, far from winding down, has merely shifted venues and perhaps invited some even more imposing guests. The diversity of life, which exploded so dramatically in the Cambrian, continues to expand a process known as the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event. Think of it as the Cambrian explosion's encore performance, but with a bigger budget and more ambitious special effects. The seafloor, no longer just a patchwork of microbial mats and the occasional adventurous burrower, is now carpeted with life. Vast forests of crinoids, those delicate, feathery sea lilies, which are actually animals related to starfish and sea urchins, wave gently in the currents, their stalks anchored to the seabed, their arms filtering microscopic plankton. Among them, intricate bryozoan colonies looking like miniature lacy fans or delicate branching corals create complex three-dimensional habitats. And everywhere the trilobites, those seemingly indestructible mainstays of the Paleozoic, continue their scuttling, diversifying into an even greater array of forms, some becoming sleek and streamlined for faster movement, others developing even more elaborate and formidable spines, presumably as a fashion statement that also discouraged being eaten. One can imagine a trilobite parent sternly telling its offspring, "Now don't you go losing those cephalic spines, young man. They're your best defense against those things." And by things, they would have meant the new top dogs in town, the creatures that now cast the longest, most menacing shadows across these ancient, bustling seabeds. You sense a presence, a large, dark shape, gliding silently through the mid-water, and it's not another oversized, slightly comical anomalocaris. This is something else entirely, something with a more streamlined, torpedo-like menace. You catch a glimpse, a long conical shell tapering to a point with a squid-like head and tentacles emerging from the wider open end. This, my friend, is an orthocone nautiloid, one of the undisputed apex predators of the Ordovician seas. Imagine a squid, but instead of a soft, squishy body, it lives inside a rigid, chambered, ice cream cone-shaped shell that it has built itself. An authoritative fact for you, some species of these orthocone nautiloids, like Endoceras, could grow to truly astonishing sizes, with shells estimated to reach lengths of up to 6 meters or nearly 20 feet, and perhaps even larger, according to some more enthusiastic or perhaps optimistic paleontological estimates. These weren't just passive drifters, they were active, intelligent hunters. They could control their buoyancy by adjusting the gas content in the internal chambers of their shells, allowing them to rise and sink through the water column with surprising agility for such a seemingly cumbersome design. Their large, well-developed eyes scanned the waters for prey, primarily trilobites, crustaceans, and perhaps even smaller, less fortunate nautiloids, and their powerful tentacles, likely armed with suckers or hooks, would snatch victims and draw them towards a sharp, parrot-like beak. You watch one of these giants, perhaps a slightly more modest 3-meter specimen, as it stalks a particularly plump trilobite that has unwisely ventured a little too far from the protective nooks and crannies of the reef. There's a slow, deliberate approach, then a sudden burst of speed achieved by expelling water through a siphon, early jet propulsion no less. The tentacles shoot out a writhing, inescapable net, and the trilobite, despite its formidable armor, is quickly overwhelmed. The sounds are muffled, but you can imagine the crunch as that powerful beak makes short work of the arthropod's defenses. It's a stark reminder that no matter how good your armor is, someone somewhere in the evolutionary arms race is probably developing a better can opener. And if giant jet-propelled shell-wearing squid weren't enough to give you the Paleozoic heebie-jeebies, the Ordovician had another charming group of predators rapidly rising to prominence, the eurypterids, or sea scorpions. While they would reach their true terrifying zenith in the subsequent Silurian period, their Ordovician ancestors were already making a name for themselves as formidable hunters. Picture a scorpion, but supersized aquatic and with paddle-like appendages for swimming. Some of these early forms were relatively small, perhaps only a few inches long, but they were agile, equipped with grasping claws, chelicerae, and a distinct, if not always functional for stinging in these early models, tailspine or telson. They patrolled the shallower coastal waters and brackish estuaries, preying on smaller invertebrates and early jawless fish that were just beginning to make their timid appearance. Speaking of early fish, the Ordovician also saw the continued evolution of these first vertebrates. These weren't the sleek, finned creatures you might picture. Early forms like Arandaspis or Sacabambaspis were heavily armored, jawless bottom dwellers looking more like flattened tadpole-shaped tanks than agile swimmers. Their armor was likely a direct response to the increasing predation pressure from nautiloids and eurypterids. They probably spent most of their time hoovering up organic detritus from the seafloor, trying very hard to look inconspicuous and inedible. Nothing to see here, Mr. Nautiloid, just a weird bony rock. Definitely not delicious. An odd little fact, some of these early jawless fish, known as ostracoderms, had a peculiar third pineal eye on the top of their heads, which was light-sensitive, and might have helped them detect changes in light intensity, perhaps warning them of shadows cast by predators approaching from above. So they had eyes in the back, well, top of their heads, quite literally. The climate of the Ordovician was generally warm and balmy, with high sea levels flooding vast continental areas, creating extensive, shallow inland seas, perfect nurseries for this burgeoning biodiversity. However, the period didn't end on such a cheerful note. Towards the end of the Ordovician, around 443 million years ago, the planet experienced a severe ice age one of the most devastating mass extinction events in Earth's history. An enormous ice sheet grew over the southern supercontinent of Gondwana, causing sea levels to plummet dramatically and global temperatures to drop. This drastic environmental change, possibly coupled with changes in ocean chemistry, led to the extinction of an estimated 85% of all marine species. It was a brutal ecological reset button. Historians still debate the precise triggers and mechanisms of this Ordovician-Silurian extinction event. Was it solely the glaciation and the associated sea level fall that wiped out so many shallow water habitats, or were there other contributing factors such as a gamma-ray burst from a nearby supernova irradiating the planet, or perhaps significant volcanic activity altering the atmosphere and climate? The evidence is complex and often indirect, buried under hundreds of millions of years of geological processes. Whatever the exact cause or combination of causes, it was a stark demonstration that even in a world teeming with life, global environmental catastrophes could and did occur, reshaping the biosphere in profound and often tragic ways. You feel a chill in the water, a subtle but distinct drop in temperature, perhaps a foreshadowing of that distant icy doom. The giant orthoconies still glide with their silent predatory grace, and the early sea scorpions continue their opportunistic prowling, but the long, warm summer of the Ordovician is drawing to a close. The sheer abundance and exuberance of life you've witnessed are about to face a truly existential test. You see a large Endoceras pass by its huge shell, a testament to its current dominance, yet you know that its reign, like all reigns, is ultimately transient. The planet giveth, and the planet taketh away, often with very little warning and even less regard for the current inhabitants. The survivors of this coming chill will inherit a changed world, one that will present new challenges and new opportunities for those tenacious enough to adapt. The chill you felt at the end of the Ordovician has somewhat receded, like the memory of a particularly harsh winter finally giving way to a tentative spring. The catastrophic ice age did indeed pass, and as the glaciers melted and sea levels rose again, life, ever resilient, began its slow but steady recovery. You find yourself now in the Silurian period, spanning from about 443 to 419 million years ago. The waters are warmer now, almost tropical in feel, and the shallow seas are once again teeming, though perhaps with a slightly different cast of characters than before the Great Extinction. The survivors have diversified, filling the ecological niches left vacant by their less fortunate Ordovician cousins. The crinoid forests are back in full bloom, their feathery arms creating intricate waving underwater meadows. Brachiopods and bryozoans continue to construct their shelly havens and trilobites, though perhaps a little less dominant than in their Cambrian and Ordovician heyday, still scuttle along the seabed, ever the adaptable survivors. Coral reefs are becoming much more prominent and structurally complex during this period, creating vast, bustling cities of marine life, offering shelter and sustenance to a myriad of smaller creatures. You can almost hear the gentle, incessant hum of a reef in full swing, the clicks of crustaceans, the soft rasping of grazers, the almost imperceptible whoosh of water being filtered by countless organisms. It's a busy, productive ecosystem, a testament to life's incredible ability to bounce back from even the most devastating setbacks. But with recovery and diversification comes the inevitable return of serious top-tier predators. And in the Silurian seas, one group in particular has truly come into its own, evolving from their somewhat more modest Ordovician beginnings into the undisputed terrors of their environment. Remember those sea scorpions, the Eurypterids? Well, they've had a major growth spurt and a serious attitude adjustment. Forget the smaller tentative forms of the past. You are now in the golden age of these magnificent and frankly terrifying aquatic arachnids. Imagine, if you will, something that looks like a scorpion, but scaled up to the size of a crocodile or even larger. An authoritative fact for you: the largest known Eurypterid, Jacalopterus rhenaniae, which prowled the waters of the early Devonian, but had Silurian relatives not far behind in size, is estimated to have reached a colossal length of up to 2.5 meters or over 8 feet. This makes it one of the largest arthropods ever to have existed. These weren't just overgrown bugs, they were sophisticated, highly effective predators. They possessed powerful spiny grasping claws, their chelicerae, at the front, perfect for seizing and dismembering prey. Their bodies were segmented and armored, offering excellent protection, and their tails often ended in a sharp, paddle-like telson, which in some species might have been used for steering, or even, some paleontologists speculate, as a formidable weapon, though whether it delivered venom like modern scorpions is still a topic of much discussion. Many species also had large paddle-like swimming legs at the rear, allowing them to move through the water with surprising speed and agility. You see one now, a truly impressive specimen, perhaps a pterygotus, or a similar large genus cruising through a shallow sunlit lagoon. It's easily the length of a small kayak, its compound eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Its coloration is probably a mottled blend of greens and browns, providing excellent camouflage against the algae-covered rocks and sediments of the seabed. It moves with a sinister grace, its paddles propelling it forward with quiet efficiency. Its prey would have included early jawed fish, which were becoming more common and diverse in the Silurian, as well as trilobites, other arthropods, and perhaps even smaller, unwary eurypterids. Cannibalism was likely not off the menu for these apex predators. Waste not, want not, one might have gurgled to itself before tucking into a less fortunate cousin. The evolution of jaws in fish was a major Silurian innovation. Those armored jawless ostracoderms you might recall from the Ordovician were still around, but now they faced competition and predation from new groups like the acanthodians, or spiny sharks, though not true sharks, and the first placoderms fish that were developing bony plates especially around their heads and thoracic regions, and crucially true jaws. Jaws, of course, opened up a whole new world of dietary possibilities and also made these fish more formidable adversaries. An odd little fact for you, some of these early jawed fish had an unusual dentition. For example, some acanthodians had teeth that were not regularly replaced like ours, but were instead fused to the jawbones and simply wore down with use, with new teeth sometimes being added at the back of the jaw as it grew. Imagine having to make your first set of teeth last your entire life. Dental plans in the Silurian were presumably non-existent. The rise of these more agile jawed fish probably contributed to the decline of the trilobites, which found themselves facing new, more effective predators. Many Silurian trilobites developed even more elaborate defensive strategies. Some enrolled into tight, almost impregnable balls like modern pill bugs, while others evolved even more fearsome spines. Historians still debate the precise reasons for the gradual decline of trilobite diversity from the Silurian onwards. Was it primarily increasing predation pressure from eurypterids and the newly evolved jawed fish, or were environmental changes and competition from other groups like crustaceans also significant factors? It was likely a combination, a slow squeeze from multiple evolutionary pressures. The eurypterids, however, weren't confined solely to marine environments. Some species, particularly later in the Silurian and into the Devonian, appear to have been adapted to brackish or even freshwater habitats. There's even tantalizing evidence in the form of fossilized trackways, suggesting that some eurypterids may have been capable of short terrestrial excursions, perhaps to move between pools of water or to lay their eggs in safer predator-free areas, much like horseshoe crabs do today. Imagine strolling along a Silurian beach and encountering one of these giant 8-foot-long sea scorpions hauling itself out of the water. You'd probably decide that beachcombing could wait for another eon. Nope, I'm good. Suddenly remembered I left the primordial soup on, you might mutter, backing away very, very slowly. The land itself during the Silurian was also beginning to change in profound ways. While life in the seas was undergoing this dramatic recovery and reorganization, the first tentative pioneers were beginning to colonize the terrestrial realm. These weren't towering forests or herds of grazing animals, not yet. But small, humble plants, probably resembling mosses and liverworts, were starting to gain a foothold along the edges of rivers and lakes. And following them, or perhaps even preceding them in some cases, were the first terrestrial arthropods, tiny mites, early myriapods, ancestors of millipedes and centipedes, and possibly even very primitive scorpion-like arachnids. The land was still a harsh, alien environment subject to intense UV radiation and desiccation, but life was beginning its slow, inexorable conquest of this new frontier. You remain in the warm, shallow sea, however, where the eurypterids reign supreme. You watch as one elegantly dispatches a moderately sized placoderm, its spiny claws making short work of the fish's bony armor. There's a chilling efficiency to its movements, a predatory confidence born of being at the absolute top of the food chain. The Silurian seas, for all their beauty and burgeoning diversity, were a dangerous place if you were small, slow, or inadequately defended. The shadows cast by these giant sea scorpions were long and ever-present, a constant reminder that survival was a daily, often brutal struggle. The gentle lapping of the waves against a nearby newly colonized shoreline carries the faintest scent of damp earth and primitive vegetation, a hint of the vast changes that are yet to come both in the water and increasingly on the land. The tropical warmth of the Silurian seas, dominated by those rather intimidating giant sea scorpions, gradually gives way to a new era, a period so defined by its aquatic inhabitants that it's famously known as the Age of Fishes. You've now drifted into the Devonian period, which began around 419 million years ago and lasted for a considerable stretch until about 359 million years ago. The world feels subtly different. The continents are continuing their slow tectonic ballet, creating new ocean basins and altering current patterns. The early tentative land plants you glimpsed in the Silurian have undergone a significant evolutionary burst. True forests, albeit composed of rather alien-looking primitive trees like lycophytes and progymnosperms, are beginning to spread across the terrestrial landscape, profoundly changing erosion rates and even perhaps influencing the global climate. But your focus for now remains resolutely underwater. And what a world it is! The fish, which had been making steady, if somewhat modest, progress in the preceding periods, have now truly exploded in diversity and, crucially, in size and ferocity. The jawless ostracoderms are still around, though their numbers are dwindling in the face of more advanced, jawed competitors. The acanthodians, or spiny sharks, are flourishing, their streamlined bodies and multiple fins attesting to their increased agility. Early true sharks, sleek and undeniably shark-like, are beginning to make their predatory presence felt, gliding through the Devonian waters with an ancient, predatory grace. And then there are the placoderms. Oh, the placoderms. If the Silurian was the age of the eurypterid, the Devonian belonged in no small measure to these heavily armored jawed fish. They came in a bewildering array of shapes and sizes, from small, bottom-dwelling forms to truly colossal apex predators. Their defining characteristic was their extensive bony armor, particularly encasing their head and thoracic regions, forming a kind of jointed tank-like carapace. This armor was often incredibly thick and robust, a clear testament to the intense predation pressures of the time, or perhaps an indication of their own aggressive predatory lifestyles. You think your shell is tough trilobite? Hold my Paleozoic beer, a placoderm might have gurgled. And among the placoderms, one name stands above all others, a name that has become virtually synonymous with prehistoric marine terror, Dunkleosteus. You sense its approach before you see it, a disturbance in the water, a subtle pressure wave that hints at immense power. And then it materializes from the murky depths, a truly nightmarish apparition. Dunkleosteus terrelli was a monster. An authoritative fact for you, this apex predator, one of the largest placoderms, could reach estimated lengths of 6 to 9 meters, around 20 to 30 feet, and weigh over a ton. Its head and the front part of its body were encased in incredibly thick, articulated, bony plates, making it virtually invulnerable to most contemporary attackers. The rest of its body behind this armored hood was likely unarmored, and perhaps somewhat shark-like or eel-like in form, though fossil evidence for its posterior half is frustratingly scarce. But it's the business end of Dunkleosteus that truly commands your horrified attention. It didn't have true teeth in the way that sharks or mammals do. Instead, the bony plates of its jaws formed enormous self-sharpening razor-edged shearing blades. These tooth plates were extensions of the jaw bones themselves, and as the mouth opened and closed, the edges would grind against each other, maintaining their lethal sharpness. Imagine a pair of gigantic bone-crushing bolt cutters powered by incredibly strong jaw muscles. Paleontologists have calculated that Dunkleosteus possessed one of the most powerful bites of any fish ever capable of generating forces of thousands of pounds per square inch at the tips of its fangs. It could slice through the thick armor of other placoderms, dismember large sharks, and presumably make very short work of any unfortunate eurypterids or nautiloids that crossed its path. You watch from a safe metaphysical distance as a Dunkleosteus hunts. It's not a particularly agile swimmer over long distances. That heavy frontal armor likely made it somewhat cumbersome, but it was capable of surprisingly rapid bursts of speed for short-range attacks, and its method of feeding was devastatingly effective. It could open its mouth incredibly quickly in as little as 1/50th of a second, creating a powerful suction that would draw prey items directly into its gaping blade-lined maw. There's a sudden lunge, a flash of bone, and a smaller, heavily armored fish simply vanishes in a cloud of displaced water and perhaps a few unfortunate severed fragments. No chewing, no delicate nibbling, just catastrophic, instantaneous obliteration. It's the kind of creature that makes you profoundly grateful for the invention of dry land. The Devonian seas were not, however, exclusively the domain of these armored terrors. Other significant groups of fish were also thriving. The sarcopterygians, or lobe-finned fishes, were an important group. These fish, as their name suggests, possessed fleshy lobed fins, which had a central appendage of bone and muscle rather different from the ray fins of most modern fish. And among the sarcopterygians were the ancestors of all terrestrial vertebrates. Yes, including you. Somewhere, in the shallow, perhaps oxygen-poor, swampy waters of the Devonian, certain lobe-finned fish like Tiktaalik were developing features that would prove crucial for life on land. Robust fin skeletons that could support weight and early lungs for breathing air. An odd little fact for you, the coelacanth, a famous living fossil lobe-finned fish that was once thought to have gone extinct with the dinosaurs, is a distant relative of these Devonian pioneers. Its fins, while not used for walking, show that characteristic lobed structure. Finding a living coelacanth in 1938 after it was presumed extinct for 66 million years was one of the most sensational biological discoveries of the 20th century. It's like finding a very small, very confused triceratops paddling around in your local lake. Historians still debate the precise environmental pressures that drove these lobe-finned fish towards a terrestrial existence. Was it to escape predation from giants like Dunkleosteus in the crowded Devonian waters? Was it to exploit new food resources like the burgeoning populations of terrestrial arthropods along the water's edge? Or was it perhaps to find refuge in shallow, deoxygenated pools where their air-breathing abilities gave them a distinct advantage? Likely, it was a confluence of these factors, a perfect storm of opportunity and necessity that pushed these remarkable creatures to take those first tentative steps onto land. The end of the Devonian, however, was marked by another significant biotic crisis, the late Devonian extinction event. This wasn't a single sudden catastrophe like the Ordovician Ice Age, but rather a prolonged series of extinction pulses spread over millions of years. It primarily affected marine life, particularly tropical reef-building organisms like corals and stromatoporoids, and many groups of fish, including eventually the mighty placoderms like Dunkleosteus. The exact causes are still debated, but likely involve prolonged global cooling, anoxia, lack of oxygen in the oceans, possibly triggered by increased nutrient runoff from the newly forested land, leading to massive algal blooms and subsequent decomposition. It's a complex, messy picture, a reminder that ecological webs, even ancient ones, are delicately balanced. You see the shadow of Dunkleosteus pass one last time its reign as the ocean's apex predator, drawing to a close not through conquest by a superior foe, but through the slow, inexorable changes in the global environment. The age of fishes was a time of incredible innovation and diversification, but also a stark reminder of the sheer brutal power of nature's apex predators. The shearing blades of Dunkleosteus are a chilling testament to the evolutionary arms race, a high watermark in the development of biological weaponry. As the Devonian wanes, the torch of vertebrate dominance is slowly, almost reluctantly, being passed from the fin to the limb, from the aquatic realm to the terrestrial frontier. The world is changing and the monsters are evolving. The murky, predator-filled waters of the Devonian home to the terrifying Dunkleosteus slowly recede from your consciousness. You feel a profound shift, not just in your surroundings, but in the very air itself. It's thick, almost tangible, and remarkably easy to breathe if you were, actually breathing it. You've arrived in the Carboniferous period, which stretched from about 359 to 299 million years ago. This is an era famously characterized by two things: vast swampy forests and an atmosphere supercharged with oxygen. You find yourself not in the ocean, but on land, or at least very near the edge of a colossal humid swamp. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth, decaying vegetation, and something else, something vaguely resinous and primeval. Towering fern-like trees, lycopsids such as lepidodendron, scale trees and sigillaria soar to heights of 30 or even 40 meters, their bark patterned with distinctive diamond or hexagonal leaf scars. Giant horsetails, calamites, looking like monstrous woody reeds, form dense thickets along the waterways. This isn't a forest you'd recognize from a modern nature documentary. It's an alien landscape of bizarre spore-bearing giants, creating a gloomy, perpetually damp understory where sunlight struggles to penetrate. And it's these vast forests that are responsible for the period's other defining feature. An authoritative fact for you: during the Carboniferous, photosynthetic activity by these immense forests pumped unprecedented amounts of oxygen into the atmosphere, reaching levels perhaps as high as 35% compared to our modern 21%. This oxygen-rich air had profound consequences for life, particularly for terrestrial arthropods. And that's where the danger in this particular prehistoric setting really kicks in. It's not from colossal, toothy vertebrates, at least not primarily on land just yet. No, the monsters of the Carboniferous forests were in many ways disturbingly familiar, yet grotesquely oversized. Imagine insects and other creepy crawlies, but scaled up to nightmare proportions, thanks in large part to that super-oxygenated atmosphere, which allowed their relatively inefficient respiratory systems, based on diffusion through tiny tubes called tracheae, to support much larger body sizes. You hear a rustling in the dense ferny undergrowth, a sound like dry leaves being disturbed by something substantial. And then you see it, Arthropleura. Picture a millipede, but instead of a few inches long, this behemoth could reach lengths of up to 2.5 meters over 8 feet, and perhaps half a meter wide. It's the largest known land invertebrate of all time. Its flattened, segmented body, composed of numerous articulating plates, ripples as it moves with surprising speed across the forest floor. Its many legs, though not quite 1,000 despite the milli in millipede, propelling it with an unnerving, sinuous grace. What did it eat? For a long time, Arthropleura was thought to be a fearsome predator, but more recent fossil evidence, including gut contents and the structure of its mouthparts, suggests it was more likely a herbivore or detritivore, munching on decaying plant matter and spores. Still, encountering an 8-foot-long armored millipede casually browsing on ferns would likely be enough to make you reconsider your Carboniferous hiking plans. "Excuse me, sir, just passing through. Don't mind me. Lovely weather for giant arthropods, isn't it?" you might stammer, trying to appear as non-threatening and non-edible as possible. And the oversized arthropod horrors don't stop there. Look up into the dense canopy, or perhaps skimming over the surface of a murky swamp pool. You see dragonflies, or rather griffinflies, the meganeurids. And these are not your delicate garden variety dragonflies. Meganeura and its relatives were colossal, with wingspans that could reach up to 75 centimeters or nearly 30 inches, the size of a modern hawk or a small eagle. Imagine a dragonfly with the wingspan of a crow buzzing past your head. These were active predators, their large, multifaceted eyes spotting smaller flying insects. Yes, flight had well and truly evolved by now, or perhaps even small amphibians or early reptiles near the water's edge. Their spiny legs would form a basket to snatch prey out of the air with terrifying efficiency. The whirring of their giant wings would have been a constant and probably quite unsettling soundtrack to the Carboniferous swamps. Then there were the arachnids. Scorpions, already ancient by this point, continued to thrive, and some Carboniferous forms were impressively large, though perhaps not quite as monstrous as the aquatic eurypterids of earlier periods. But new groups of arachnids were also diversifying. You might encounter primitive spiders, perhaps not yet weaving a classic orb web, but certainly capable of delivering a nasty bite. And then there are the more obscure but no less creepy orders like the trigonotarbids, heavily armored spider-like arachnids that look like tiny eight-legged tanks. An odd little fact for you, some Carboniferous arachnids like Pulmonoscorpius kirktonensis, a scorpion species from Scotland, could reach lengths of up to 70 centimeters, over 2 feet. While not quite Arthropleura-sized, a 2-foot scorpion is definitely something you'd want to give a wide berth. Its name, Pulmonoscorpius, literally means breathing scorpion, referring to its well-preserved, fossilized book lungs. Amphibians were also having a good time in these vast watery Carboniferous landscapes. Having made the transition from finned fish to limbed tetrapods in the preceding Devonian, they diversified into a wide array of forms. Some, like Eriops, were large, robust salamander-like creatures, semi-aquatic predators with wide, flat heads and mouths full of sharp teeth, perfectly adapted for ambushing fish or unwary terrestrial creatures at the water's edge. Others were more eel-like or even snake-like in their adaptations. These weren't the cute, harmless frogs and newts of today. Many Carboniferous amphibians were formidable predators in their own right, some reaching several meters in length. You might see one lurking in the shallows, its eyes just breaking the surface, patiently waiting for a large insect or a smaller amphibian to stray too close. The first true reptiles also made their appearance during the Carboniferous. Small lizard-like creatures such as Hylonomus, they were initially overshadowed by the larger amphibians. However, their key innovation, the amniotic egg, which could be laid on land without drying out, gave them a crucial advantage in exploiting drier terrestrial environments away from the perpetual dampness of the swamps. This was a revolutionary development that would eventually allow reptiles to become the dominant terrestrial vertebrates in subsequent periods. Historians still debate the exact impact of these high oxygen levels on vertebrate physiology. While it clearly allowed for gigantism in arthropods, did it also influence the evolution and metabolism of early tetrapods? Some scientists speculate that the oxygen-rich atmosphere might have facilitated the higher metabolic rates needed for more active terrestrial lifestyles, or perhaps even influenced lung development and efficiency. Others argue that the direct physiological effects on vertebrates were less pronounced than on arthropods. It remains an area of active research and discussion. The Carboniferous wasn't just about monstrous bugs and swampy forests, though. Towards the end of the period, the climate began to change. The Earth started to cool, and vast ice sheets once again spread across parts of the southern supercontinent Gondwana. This led to drier conditions in many regions, causing the great coal swamps to shrink and fragment. This climatic shift, known as the Carboniferous rainforest collapse, had a profound impact on the ecosystems of the time, leading to extinctions among the swamp-dependent amphibians and giant arthropods, and paving the way for the more drought-tolerant reptiles to rise to prominence in the upcoming Permian period. You take one last look around this humid alien world. The air buzzes with the wings of giant insects, the ground trembles faintly under the passage of colossal millipedes, and the shadows in the murky water hide large, toothy amphibians. It's a world teeming with life, but also with a unique set of dangers, a place where even the bugs could be genuine monsters. The sheer scale of some of these Carboniferous creepy crawlies is enough to make your skin crawl even as a disembodied observer. As the climate cools and the swamps recede, this particular brand of gigantism will fade, but the evolutionary stage is being set for new, and arguably even more formidable creatures to take center stage. The humid, oxygen-laden air and the colossal creepy crawlies of the Carboniferous begin to fade, replaced by a climate that feels altogether drier, more seasonal, and in some regions considerably harsher. You've transitioned into the Permian period, the final chapter of the Paleozoic era, stretching from about 299 to 252 million years ago. The great coal swamps have largely retreated, giving way to more extensive conifer forests, deserts, and varied terrestrial landscapes. The supercontinent Pangaea has now fully assembled a colossal landmass stretching from pole to pole, which had profound effects on global climate patterns, creating vast arid interiors and more extreme temperature fluctuations. The reign of the giant arthropods is largely over their size, constrained by the now more moderate oxygen levels closer to what we experience today. Amphibians, while still present and diverse, are no longer the undisputed kings of the terrestrial vertebrate scene. That honor now firmly belongs to the reptiles, or more accurately, to a diverse group of animals that includes the ancestors of mammals, the synapsids, as well as the true reptiles, sauropsids. The Permian was truly the age when these groups came into their own, diversifying into a fascinating and often fearsome array of forms that dominated terrestrial ecosystems. You find yourself on a sun-baked plain dotted with hardy conifers and seed ferns. The air is dry and the sun beats down with an intensity that speaks of arid conditions. In the distance you see a herd of stocky, barrel-bodied herbivores, perhaps Edaphosaurus or Cotylohynchus, placidly munching on tough vegetation. These are early synapsids, part of the group called pelycosaurs, and where there are herbivores, there are inevitably carnivores. And the most iconic carnivore of the early Permian is undoubtedly Dimetrodon. You see one now basking in the sun, its most striking feature immediately apparent, a magnificent sail-like structure running along its back, supported by elongated neural spines of its vertebrae. This sail, which could be quite tall, up to 1.5 meters in some species, is a subject of much scientific fascination. An authoritative fact for you, Dimetrodon, despite its reptilian appearance and its common depiction alongside dinosaurs, was not a dinosaur. It was a synapsid, meaning it belonged to the lineage that eventually led to mammals. In fact, it's more closely related to you than it is to a Tyrannosaurus rex that sail on its back. Its exact function is still debated, but leading theories suggest it was primarily used for thermoregulation, absorbing heat from the sun to warm up quickly in the morning or radiating excess heat to cool down. It might also have played a role in display, perhaps to attract mates or intimidate rivals. Check out the dorsal bling ladies. One might have thought angling its sail for maximum solar exposure and romantic impact. Dimetrodon itself was a formidable predator, ranging in size from about 1.7 to 4.6 meters, roughly 6 to 15 feet long. It had a powerful skull with differentiated teeth, sharp canines for gripping and slicing, and smaller blade-like teeth for shearing flesh, a characteristic of synapsids that foreshadows the specialized dentition of later mammals. It would have preyed upon other synapsids, amphibians, and early reptiles, a true apex predator of its early Permian environment. You watch as one, perhaps a mid-sized individual, stalks a smaller, unwary herbivore. There's a patient, almost cat-like deliberation in its movements, followed by a surprisingly swift burst of speed and a decisive, powerful bite. As the Permian progresses, however, the pelycosaurs, like Dimetrodon, gradually give way to more advanced, more mammal-like synapsids called therapsids. These were a diverse group, including herbivores, carnivores, and even some insectivores. And among the carnivorous therapsids of the late Permian I group stands out as particularly terrifying the Gorgonopsians. Imagine a creature that combines the predatory prowess of a wolf or a big cat with some distinctly reptilian features, and then adds a pair of enormous saber-like canine teeth. That's a Gorgonopsian. These were the apex predators of the late Permian, replacing Dimetrodon and its kin at the top of the food chain. Species like Inostrancevia or Gorgonops itself could reach sizes comparable to a large bear, with massively built skulls and those terrifying dagger-like canines that could be up to 12 centimeters, nearly 5 inches long. Their limbs were held more directly beneath their bodies than the sprawling gait of earlier pelycosaurs, suggesting they were more agile and efficient hunters. They likely hunted large herbivorous therapsids like the dicynodonts, tusked, beaked herbivores, that looked a bit like portly reptilian pigs and pariasaurs, large armored herbivorous reptiles. You see one, a sleek muscular lycaenops, perhaps its eyes glinting with predatory intelligence as it surveys its domain. There's a raw, primal power to these creatures, a sense of efficient lethality. An odd little fact for you some therapsids, particularly the cynodonts, a group that includes the direct ancestors of mammals, show evidence of features we typically associate with mammals, such as pits on their snouts, that may have housed whiskers, suggesting they might have been developing fur and even some degree of warm-bloodedness. The Permian was a crucial period for the evolution of these mammal-like traits. Were Gorgonopsians furry? Unlikely, given their generally reptilian appearance in reconstructions, but the line between reptile and mammal was becoming increasingly blurred within the synapsid lineage. While the synapsids were dominating many terrestrial ecosystems, the true reptile sauropsids were also diversifying. Early diapsids, the ancestors of lizards, snakes, crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds, were present, though often smaller and less conspicuous than the synapsids. However, one group of Permian reptiles, the pariasaurs, became quite large and heavily armored herbivores, some looking like prehistoric reptilian ankylosaurs covered in bony scutes and spikes. They were probably a tough meal, even for a hungry Gorgonopsian. Historians still debate the extent of warm-bloodedness, or endothermy, among the various Permian synapsid groups. While features like upright posture and potentially fur in cynodonts suggest a trend towards higher metabolic rates, it's unclear how metabolically active creatures like Dimetrodon or the Gorgonopsians were. Was Dimetrodon's sail primarily for slow passive thermoregulation, or did it supplement a more active metabolism? Were Gorgonopsians agile pursuit, predators capable of sustained activity or more ambush, hunters relying on short bursts of speed? The fossil evidence provides clues, but definitive answers remain elusive. The Permian period, for all its fascinating evolutionary developments, ended with the most catastrophic event in the history of life on Earth, the Permian Triassic extinction event, also known as the Great Dying. Around 252 million years ago, an estimated 96% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species went extinct. It was an unparalleled ecological apocalypse. The exact cause is still a subject of intense research, but the leading hypothesis points to massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia, known as the Siberian Traps. These eruptions released colossal amounts of greenhouse gases, leading to runaway global warming, ocean acidification, and widespread anoxia. It was a perfect storm of environmental devastation that pushed life on Earth to the very brink of annihilation. You feel a growing unease, a sense of impending doom as the Permian draws to its calamitous close. The formidable Gorgonopsians, the bizarre Dicynodonts, the sail-backed pelycosaurs, all these remarkable creatures, products of millions of years of evolution, are about to face an unimaginable catastrophe. The sun seems to dim, the air grows heavy and stagnant, and the vibrant ecosystems you've witnessed begin to wither and die. It's a somber end to the Paleozoic era, a period that saw the explosion of animal life, the conquest of the land, and the rise of terrifying predators, only to culminate in a global die-off of almost incomprehensible scale. The survivors of this great dying will inherit a profoundly changed and largely empty world, setting the stage for a new era, the Mesozoic, and the rise of an entirely new dynasty of rulers, the dinosaurs. The oppressive, deathly stillness of the Permian Triassic extinction event slowly, ever so slowly, begins to lift. It's like waking from a terrible fever dream. The world you now find yourself in, the early Triassic period, which began around 252 million years ago, is a scarred and profoundly altered landscape. The sheer devastation of the Great Dying is palpable. Ecosystems are shattered, biodiversity is decimated, and the planet itself seems to be struggling to recover. The air feels hot and dry, the skies often hazy. Vast swathes of Pangaea, the supercontinent, are inhospitable deserts. It's a disaster fauna world populated by the hardy, opportunistic survivors, the ecological generalists who managed to cling to life while so many others perished. You are standing on cracked, parched earth under a relentless sun. The lush forests and teeming swamps of earlier periods are largely gone, replaced by sparse, drought-tolerant vegetation like conifers, seed ferns such as dicroidium and cycads. Life feels tentative, almost fragile. The dominant terrestrial vertebrates are no longer the diverse synapsids like the gorgonopsians or dicynodonts that ruled the Permian. While some synapsid lineages did survive, notably the cynodonts, which include our own direct ancestors, and some dicynodonts like Lystrosaurus, they are generally smaller, less diverse, and often overshadowed by a newly ascendant group, the archosaurs. Archosaurs, the ruling reptiles, are a group that includes crocodilians, pterosaurs, dinosaurs, and birds. And in the early and middle Triassic, before the dinosaurs truly hit their stride, it was the crurotarsans, the archosaur lineage that includes modern crocodiles and their extinct relatives, who were making a serious bid for global domination. You see them now, these early crocodilian ancestors, and they are not the semi-aquatic ambush predators you might be familiar with. Many Triassic crurotarsans were surprisingly terrestrial, agile, and in some cases terrifyingly large. Imagine creatures like Postosuchus or Saurosuchus. These were not slow, lumbering beasts. Postosuchus, for instance, a Rauisuchian from the late Triassic of North America, could reach lengths of 4-5 meters, 13-16 feet, and walked on its hind legs, or at least primarily so, like a carnivorous dinosaur. It had a massive skull filled with dagger-like teeth and was undoubtedly one of the apex predators of its environment, preying on dicynodonts, early dinosaurs, and other reptiles. An authoritative fact for you: for a long time, some paleontologists thought creatures like Postosuchus were direct ancestors of dinosaurs due to their bipedal stance and predatory nature. However, detailed anatomical studies have confirmed their place within the crurotarsan lineage, making them more like distant cousins to crocodiles, albeit very formidable land-dwelling ones. They were the Triassic equivalent of a grizzly bear crossed with a crocodile on 2 legs. Anyone seen a small tasty dinosaur around here, asking for a friend? Who is me? One might have growled its eyes, scanning the arid landscape. Other crurotarsans, like the phytosaurs, evolved a remarkably crocodile-like appearance and lifestyle through convergent evolution. They were heavily armored semi-aquatic predators with long snouts full of sharp teeth, lurking in the rivers and lakes of the Triassic, preying on fish and any unwary terrestrial animals that came too close to the water's edge. One key difference from true crocodiles: their nostrils were located high on their heads, near their eyes, rather than at the tip of the snout. An odd little fact: despite their uncanny resemblance to crocodiles, phytosaurs are not considered true crocodilians and belong to a distinct, extinct group of archosaurs. It's a classic case of evolution hitting upon a successful body plan multiple times independently. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just maybe move the nostrils around a bit for variety. And what about the dinosaurs? Well, they made their first, rather humble appearance in the Middle Triassic, around 230–240 million years ago. These early dinosaurs were generally small, bipedal, and relatively rare compared to the dominant crurotarsans. Creatures like Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus from South America were among the earliest known forms. They were agile carnivores, perhaps preying on smaller reptiles and insects, or scavenging. They didn't immediately take over the world. For much of the Triassic, they lived in the shadows of their larger, more established archosaur cousins. You might catch a glimpse of one, a lithe, fast-moving form darting through the undergrowth, a hint of the giants they would eventually become. But for now, they are secondary players in this recovering world. The synapsid survivors, our distant kin, were also adapting. The cynodonts, in particular, were becoming increasingly mammal-like. Small, probably nocturnal and insectivorous or omnivorous creatures like Thrinaxodon or Oligokyphus show features like differentiated teeth, a secondary palate allowing them to breathe and eat, at the same time crucial for higher metabolic rates, and possibly even fur and whiskers. They were laying the groundwork for the true mammals which would make their own quiet debut later in the Triassic. Historians still debate the exact factors that allowed the dinosaurs to eventually rise to dominance by the end of the Triassic and into the Jurassic. Was it simply that they were better adapted, possessing some inherent physiological or anatomical advantage, like a more efficient respiratory system or a more upright posture leading to greater agility? Or was their ascendancy more a matter of luck, opportunistically filling the ecological vacuum left when many of the dominant Crurotarsan groups went extinct at the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event? This extinction, less severe than the Permian-Triassic catastrophe, but still significant, seems to have disproportionately affected the large terrestrial Crurotarsans while many dinosaur lineages sailed through relatively unscathed. The answer is likely a combination of intrinsic advantages and extrinsic opportunistic circumstances. The oceans, too, were slowly recovering during the Triassic. After the devastation of the great dying marine ecosystems were gradually repopulated, new groups of marine reptiles began to appear, taking advantage of the vacant ecological niches. Early ichthyosaurs, dolphin-like predators, hunted fish and cephalopods. Nothosaurs, semi-aquatic reptiles with paddle-like limbs and long necks, patrolled coastal waters. And placodonts, heavily built armored reptiles with flat, crushing teeth, specialized in feeding on shellfish. The seas were becoming dangerous again, but with a new cast of reptilian characters. The Triassic period, therefore, was a time of profound transition and recovery. It was a crucible in which the survivors of the Earth's greatest catastrophe adapted, diversified, and competed for dominance in a harsh and unforgiving world. It saw the rise of the archosaurs, the initial radiation of the Crurotarsans, and the humble beginnings of the dinosaurs. It witnessed the continued evolution of mammal-like cynodonts, quietly biding their time. And it ended with another extinction event that ironically may have cleared the path for the dinosaurs to finally step out of the shadows and into the spotlight, ushering in the true age of reptiles. You sensed the ground begin to tremble, not from the heavy tread of a Postosuchus this time, but from something new, something that heralds an even grander and arguably more terrifying dynasty. The world is healing, but it is also preparing for a new and much larger scale of prehistoric peril. The arid, somewhat tentative landscapes of the Triassic, with their formidable land croc impersonators and the first shy dinosaurs, give way to a world that feels altogether more lush, more vibrant, and significantly more gigantic. You have arrived in the Jurassic period, a name that resonates with a primeval thrill, largely thanks to popular culture, but for very good reasons. Spanning from about 201 to 145 million years ago, the Jurassic was the time when dinosaurs truly came into their own, diversifying into an astonishing array of forms and sizes, and unequivocally establishing themselves as the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. Pangaea, the supercontinent, was beginning to break apart, leading to more humid climates, increased rainfall, and the spread of vast forests of conifers, cycads, ginkgos, and tree ferns, creating ideal habitats for these burgeoning reptilian giants. You find yourself in one such forest, the air thick with the scent of pine resin and damp earth. The scale of everything is overwhelming. The trees tower above you, their trunks, massive columns disappearing into a distant canopy. And moving among these colossal trees are creatures of equally breathtaking proportions. The sauropods, those iconic, long-necked, long-tailed herbivores, are everywhere. Giants like Brachiosaurus, with its giraffe-like posture, browsing on the highest branches, or the truly immense Diplodocus and Apatosaurus, their necks sweeping across lower vegetation like colossal living vacuum cleaners. Their footsteps, when they move, are like distant thunder shaking the very ground beneath your metaphorical feet. These were the largest land animals ever to have walked the earth-living mountains of flesh and bone. And where there are such abundant large herbivores, there must by ecological necessity be equally impressive carnivores to prey upon them. The Jurassic was home to some of the most fearsome predatory dinosaurs ever to evolve. You hear a guttural roar, a sound that vibrates deep in your chest even as an ethereal observer, and then you see it emerging from the tree line, Allosaurus. Allosaurus fragilis was one of the dominant large theropods of the late Jurassic, particularly in North America. An authoritative fact for you, Allosaurus was a formidable predator, reaching lengths of up to 8.5 to 9, 7 meters, 28 to 32 feet. Though some fragmentary remains suggest individuals could have grown even larger, possibly up to 12 meters, 39 feet. It had a massive skull proportionally larger than that of many later giant theropods, filled with long, sharp, serrated teeth that were constantly being replaced. Its forelimbs, though relatively small compared to its body size, were robust and tipped with 3 large, wickedly curved claws, perfect for grasping and tearing at prey. It walked on powerful hind limbs, a bipedal terror built for pursuit and power. Paleontologists believe Allosaurus likely hunted a variety of prey, including ornithopods, beaked herbivorous dinosaurs, stegosaurs, and perhaps even juvenile or sick sauropods. Evidence from fossil sites like the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry in Utah, where dozens of Allosaurus individuals have been found, suggests they may have sometimes congregated, perhaps to scavenge or even hunt cooperatively, though this is still a topic of debate. Imagine a pack of 30-foot-long multi-ton predators with steak knife teeth and grappling hook claws. Dinner time, kids, and it looks like young Diplodocus is on the menu tonight. Try not to get stepped on, one might have bellowed to its hungry brood. Speaking of stegosaurs, you see one nearby, a magnificent stegosaurus itself, with its distinctive double row of large diamond-shaped bony plates running along its back and the formidable spear-like spikes on its tail, known as a thagomizer. These herbivores, while not as colossal as the sauropods, were certainly no easy meal. Those backplates, once thought to be primarily for defense, are now believed by many paleontologists to have also played a significant role in thermoregulation, similar to Dimetrodon's sail, or in display perhaps flushed with color to attract mates or intimidate rivals. An odd little fact for you, the term thagomizer for the tail spikes was actually coined by cartoonist Gary Larson in a 1982 Far Side comic strip, where a caveman professor points to a slide of a stegosaurus tail and says, "Now this end is called the thagomizer," after the late Thag Simmons. Paleontologists found this so amusing and apt that the term has been widely adopted in scientific literature. So yes, a dinosaur's weapon is officially named after a fictional caveman. Science can be fun. The thagomizer was no joke, however. Fossil evidence, including Allosaurus bones with puncture wounds that perfectly match the size and spacing of Stegosaurus tail spikes, clearly indicates that these herbivores could and did defend themselves very effectively. A well-aimed swing of that spiked tail could inflict serious, potentially fatal injuries on an attacking predator. It was a classic evolutionary arms race, bigger, badder predators driving the evolution of better defenses in their prey, and vice versa. The Jurassic skies were also becoming increasingly populated. Pterosaurs, those flying reptiles that first appeared in the Triassic, diversified into a wide array of forms during the Jurassic. Some, like Pterodactylus, were relatively small with wingspans comparable to modern birds of prey. Others, like Rhamphorhynchus, had long tails ending in a diamond-shaped vein and teeth adapted for catching fish. They soared over the Jurassic landscapes, hunting insects, fish, and small terrestrial vertebrates, adding an aerial dimension to the prehistoric peril. You might see them gliding effortlessly on thermal currents, their leathery wings casting fleeting shadows on the ground below. And in the Jurassic oceans, marine reptiles continued their reign. Ichthyosaurs, now even more streamlined and fish-like, were abundant. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks and paddle-like limbs, hunted in the seas. Some, like Elasmosaurus, though more famous from the Cretaceous, had astonishingly long necks, while others, the pliosaurs, evolved into colossal, short-necked apex predators with massive skulls and enormous teeth. Leopleurodon, a Jurassic plesiosaur, has gained considerable fame and some size exaggeration in popular media, but it was undoubtedly a terrifying hunter, the marine equivalent of Allosaurus or even larger. Imagine diving into a Jurassic sea and coming face to face with a 20-foot or more reptilian whale with a head full of banana-sized teeth. You'd probably invent scuba diving and then immediately uninvent it. Historians still debate the social behavior of many dinosaurs, particularly large theropods like Allosaurus. Were they solitary hunters, or did they exhibit pack behavior as suggested by some fossil assemblages? The evidence is often ambiguous. Trackways sometimes show multiple individuals moving together, but this could indicate contemporaneous movement rather than true cooperative hunting. Bone beds with multiple individuals could be the result of animals congregating at a water source during a drought or getting trapped in mud rather than a hunting pack. It's a fascinating puzzle that requires piecing together clues from bones' footprints and the geological context in which they are found. The Jurassic was a period of giants, a time when life on Earth seemed to be experimenting with the very limits of size and scale, both for herbivores and the carnivores that preyed upon them. The air, the land, and the seas were all dominated by reptiles of incredible diversity and in many cases terrifying predatory prowess. The world felt ancient, powerful, and undeniably dangerous. As the Jurassic draws to a close and the continents continue their slow drift apart, the stage is being set for the final and perhaps most famous act of the Mesozoic era, the Cretaceous, an age that will see the evolution of the most iconic dinosaur of them all. The ground still trembles, but the roars are about to get even louder. The lush, conifer-dominated forests and the thunderous footsteps of Jurassic giants gradually transition into a world that feels in some ways even more dynamic and perhaps a touch more familiar, yet still profoundly alien and undeniably perilous. You have arrived in the Cretaceous period, the final climactic chapter of the Mesozoic era, stretching from about 145 million years ago, all the way to that rather abrupt and famous ending, around 66 million years ago. This was a long and incredibly varied period, witnessing significant geological and biological changes. The supercontinent Pangaea continued its fragmentation, leading to the formation of more distinct continents and ocean basins, which in turn influenced global climate patterns and spurred regional evolutionary diversification. One of the most significant botanical innovations of the Cretaceous was the rise and diversification of flowering plants or angiosperms. In the early Cretaceous, they were relatively minor components of the flora, but by the late Cretaceous, they had come to dominate many terrestrial ecosystems, co-evolving with new groups of insects like bees and butterflies that facilitated their pollination. This greening of the world with flowers and broad-leaved trees would have given late Cretaceous landscapes a somewhat more modern, though still distinctly prehistoric feel compared to the conifer and fern vistas of the Jurassic. Imagine the scent of primitive magnolias mingling with the earthy aroma of cycads. But let's be honest, you're not here for the flowers, are you? You're here for the headliners, the rock stars of the dinosaur world. And the Cretaceous delivered them in spectacular fashion. The sauropods, while still present, especially titanosaurs in the southern hemisphere, were perhaps not quite as dominant in the northern hemisphere as they had been in the Jurassic. Herbivorous niches were increasingly filled by new groups of highly successful ornithischian, bird-hipped dinosaurs. You see vast herds of hadrosaurs or duck-billed dinosaurs like Edmontosaurus or Parasaurolophus, with its incredible hollow head crest used for display and vocalization, peacefully browsing on the new flowering plants. And then there are the ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs like the iconic Triceratops, with its massive three-horned skull and formidable bony frill, essentially a walking reptilian battle tank. And the ankylosaurs, veritable armored fortresses covered in bony plates and spikes, often culminating in a massive bone-crushing tail club like Ankylosaurus itself. These herbivores were well defended, and for good reason, because stalking these impressive herbivores was some of the largest and most terrifying carnivorous dinosaurs ever to evolve. And towering above them all, both literally and in popular imagination, is the undisputed King Tyrannosaurus Rex. You sense its presence long before you see it. A hush falls over the smaller creatures, a subtle tremor in the ground. And then it appears, pushing through a grove of prehistoric trees, a creature of almost unbelievable size and power. An authoritative fact for you, Tyrannosaurus rex, which lived during the last few million years of the late Cretaceous in what is now Western North America, was one of the largest terrestrial carnivores of all time. Adult individuals could reach lengths of up to 12.313 meters, 43 feet, stand about 3.66 to 4 meters, 12 to 13 feet tall at the hips, and weigh an estimated 8 to 14 metric tons. Its skull alone could be over 5 meters 5 feet long, packed with enormous banana-sized serrated teeth designed for crushing bone and tearing flesh. Its bite force was staggering, estimated to be the most powerful of any terrestrial animal that has ever lived. Those famously tiny two-fingered forelimbs might look a bit comical on such a colossal beast, but they were surprisingly strong and may have been used to help push itself up from a resting position or to grip struggling prey. Arms. Who needs arms when your face is a bone-splintering demolition machine? A T-Rex might have pondered if it was capable of such introspection between meals. You watch mesmerized as a T-Rex surveys its domain. Its eyesight was likely excellent, with forward-facing eyes providing good binocular vision for depth perception, crucial for a predator. Its sense of smell was also probably highly developed. Whether it was primarily an active hunter or a scavenger is a topic that has generated considerable debate among paleontologists. The truth is likely that it was both an opportunistic feeder that wouldn't turn down a free meal, but was more than capable of bringing down large, dangerous prey like triceratops or hadrosaurs. Evidence of healed bite marks on prey species and even T-Rex teeth embedded in their bones attests to its active predatory capabilities. But T-Rex, for all its solitary grandeur, wasn't the only terrifying theropod on the Cretaceous block. In other parts of the world, other giant carnivores reigned like Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus in South America, or Carcharodontosaurus in Africa, rivaling or even by some estimates exceeding T-Rex in sheer length, though perhaps not in bulk or bite force. And then there were the raptors. You hear a series of high-pitched screeches and a pack of smaller, terrifyingly agile predators bursts from the undergrowth. These are the dromaeosaurids, Velociraptor, though much smaller in reality than its movie counterparts think, turkey-sized with a nasty attitude Deinonychus and the larger Utahraptor. These were intelligent, fast-moving hunters characterized by their stiffened tails for balance, and most famously a large sickle-shaped killing claw on the second toe of each foot, held retracted while walking and then deployed with devastating effect to slash and disembowel prey. An odd little fact for you: despite their popular depiction as scaly reptiles' strong fossil evidence, including quill knobs on the arm bones of some species, attachment points for feathers indicates that many dromaeosaurids, including Velociraptor, were extensively feathered. So picture less a green leathery monster and more a very large, very angry, very toothy bird of prey from your worst nightmares. The idea of pack hunting in dromaeosaurids, famously depicted in popular culture, is compelling, but like with Allosaurus, still debated. Fossil trackways showing multiple individuals moving together, and discoveries like the fighting dinosaurs fossil, a velociraptor, and a protoceratops locked in mortal combat, suggest complex behaviors. Historians still debate whether the evidence for pack hunting in dromaeosaurs is conclusive, or if it represents other social interactions or coincidental aggregations. Regardless, even a solitary Deinonychus, a creature perhaps 2.5–3.4 meters, 8 to 11 feet long with those terrible claws, would have been a truly formidable and terrifying adversary. The Cretaceous was a period of incredible dinosaur diversity and innovation. It saw the evolution of the most sophisticated herbivores with complex dental batteries for grinding tough plant material and elaborate display structures. And it saw the pinnacle of theropod evolution with giants like T-Rex and agile, intelligent pack hunters like the dromaeosaurids. The world teemed with these magnificent and often lethal creatures. But all this evolutionary grandeur was, as we now know, heading towards a sudden and catastrophic end. As the Cretaceous period drew to its close around 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid estimated to be about 10 kilometers, 6 miles wide, slammed into the Earth in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, creating the Chicxulub crater. The immediate effects were devastating: colossal tsunamis, widespread firestorms from ejected superheated debris raining back down, and a massive earthquake. But the longer-term consequences were even more dire: a nuclear winter scenario with vast amounts of dust and soot thrown into the atmosphere, blocking out sunlight, causing global temperatures to plummet and shutting down photosynthesis. This led to a catastrophic collapse of food chains both on land and in the oceans, resulting in the extinction of an estimated 75% of all species on Earth, including all non-avian dinosaurs. You feel a sense of impending dread, a planetary shiver. The reign of these magnificent, terrifying creatures, which had lasted for over 150 million years, was about to be extinguished in a geological blink of an eye. The King T-Rex and its fearsome subjects were unknowingly living out their final days. The world was about to be fundamentally and violently reshaped once more. While the terrestrial giants like Tyrannosaurus rex and the herds of Triceratops were ruling the continents during the Cretaceous, the skies above them were far from empty. In fact, they were patrolled by some of the largest and most spectacular flying creatures ever to have existed, the pterosaurs. These weren't dinosaurs, nor were they birds, though true birds, having evolved from small theropod dinosaurs in the Jurassic, were also diversifying and sharing the Cretaceous airspace. Pterosaurs were a distinct group of flying reptiles, the first vertebrates to achieve true powered flight, and during the Mesozoic era they underwent a remarkable evolutionary journey culminating in some truly awe-inspiring forms in the Cretaceous. You find yourself on a high coastal cliff overlooking a vast, shimmering Cretaceous sea. The air is warm and the scent of salt and unfamiliar coastal vegetation fills your senses. And then you see them, soaring effortlessly on the thermal updrafts, their enormous leathery wings casting long, fleeting shadows on the waves below. These are the giants of the pterosaur world, creatures that pushed the very boundaries of vertebrate flight. One of the most iconic and largest of these Cretaceous pterosaurs was Pteranodon. An authoritative fact for you, Pteranodon longiceps from the late Cretaceous of North America had a wingspan that could reach up to 7 meters, about 23 feet. Despite this enormous span, its body was relatively small and lightweight, an essential adaptation for flight. Pteranodon is famous for its long, backward-projecting cranial crest, which varied in size and shape between species and possibly between sexes, likely serving as a display structure, a rudder for steering, or a counterbalance to its long, toothless beak. It was primarily a fish-eater soaring over the western interior seaway that once split North America and diving or skimming the surface to snatch fish with its pointed beak. Imagine a creature with the wingspan of a small airplane, but built like a delicate, hollow-boned kite gliding silently overhead. Their presence would have been a constant and perhaps slightly unnerving feature of coastal life. Honey, did you remember to bring the pterosaur-proof picnic basket last time one made off with the entire fish platter? A Cretaceous beachgoer might have lamented. But even Pteranodon, for all its impressive size, was dwarfed by the true titans of the Cretaceous skies, the Azhdarchids. This group of pterosaurs, which flourished in the late Cretaceous, included the largest flying animals known to science. You crane your neck, metaphorically of course, as one of these behemoths comes into view, perhaps a Quetzalcoatlus northropii from Texas, or its close relatives like Hatzegopteryx from Romania. These creatures were simply staggering. Quetzalcoatlus is estimated to have had a wingspan of 10 to 11 meters, around 33 to 36 feet, making it comparable in span to a modern F-16 fighter jet or a small Cessna aircraft. Its neck was incredibly long and stiff, and its head, topped with a toothless beak, was also elongated. For a long time, paleontologists envisioned Azhdarchids like Quetzalcoatlus as giant skimmers soaring over water like oversized albatrosses or pelicans. However, more recent research into their anatomy and the environments where their fossils are found, often far from large bodies of water, has led to a radical rethinking of their lifestyle. Many scientists now believe that Azhdarchids were primarily terrestrial stalkers, like giant reptilian storks or ground hornbills. Imagine this: a creature standing as tall as a giraffe on the ground thanks to its long legs and incredibly long neck, striding through the Cretaceous fern prairies and open woodlands, using its massive pointed beak to snatch up any small to medium-sized animals it encountered. Lizards, mammals, small dinosaurs, even the unfortunate offspring of larger dinosaurs. It's a terrifying image, a flying creature the size of a small plane that chooses to hunt you on foot. Talk about an evolutionary plot twist. Oh, look, a cute little struthiomimus chick gulp. An odd little fact for you, the name Quetzalcoatlus comes from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of Aztec mythology. It's a fittingly grand and evocative name for such a magnificent and almost mythical-seeming creature. The paleontologist Douglas Lawson, who discovered it, clearly had a flair for the dramatic when it came to naming his finds. The mechanics of how such enormous creatures actually got airborne and stayed aloft has been a subject of considerable scientific debate and biomechanical modeling. Historians still debate the precise launch mechanism for giant ajdarchids. Did they use a bird-like running takeoff, a bat-like drop from a height, or, as is now widely believed, a powerful quadrupedal launch, pushing off with their strong forelimbs, which formed part of the wing structure like a pole vaulter? Getting an animal the size of a giraffe, even a lightweight one, into the air would have required immense power and specialized anatomical adaptations. Their bones were incredibly light and hollow, often with paper-thin walls, yet remarkably strong due to internal struts and a complex internal structure, a masterpiece of biological engineering. The Cretaceous skies were not solely the domain of these giants, however. Smaller pterosaurs with diverse diets and lifestyles also flitted and soared. Some, like the anurognathids, though more common in the Jurassic, were small, agile, bat-like insectivores with short faces and wide gapes. Others, like the istiodactylids, had teeth suited for scavenging or perhaps eating hard-shelled prey. And all the while, true birds were also evolving and diversifying, often occupying different ecological niches, perhaps specializing in more cluttered forest environments or different types of prey. There was likely a complex interplay of competition and niche partitioning between these two distinct groups of flying vertebrates. The presence of these giant aerial predators and scavengers would have added another layer of danger to life in the Cretaceous. Not only did terrestrial creatures have to worry about theropods lurking in the undergrowth, but they also had to keep an eye on the sky. A shadow passing overhead might not just be a cloud, but a pteranodon looking for a fishy snack, or even more alarmingly, a Quetzalcoatlus eyeing you up as a potential terrestrial morsel. The world was a multi-level danger zone. As the Cretaceous period drew to its dramatic close with the Chicxulub impact event, the pterosaurs, like their non-avian dinosaur cousins, were among the casualties. This cataclysmic event, which plunged the world into darkness and caused a collapse of global ecosystems, proved too much for these magnificent flying reptiles. Their reign of the skies, which had lasted for over 150 million years, came to an end. The ecological niches they vacated would eventually be filled by the rapidly diversifying birds, the sole surviving lineage of dinosaurs, and later by bats. But for a vast stretch of Earth's history, it was the pterosaurs who were the undisputed masters of the air, soaring on leathery wings over a world of giants, a breathtaking and sometimes terrifying testament to the power of evolution to conquer every available environment. Leaving the pterosaur-patrolled skies of the Cretaceous, we now plunge beneath the waves into the vast, warm, and often treacherous oceans of the Mesozoic era. While dinosaurs dominated the land and pterosaurs commanded the air, the seas were the realm of another spectacular and terrifying group of reptiles, the marine reptiles. These were not dinosaurs, though they were reptiles, of course, but diverse lineages that had returned to the ocean, evolving incredible adaptations for an aquatic existence. The Triassic saw the early pioneers like nothosaurs and early ichthyosaurs. The Jurassic witnessed the flourishing of long-necked plesiosaurs and the emergence of colossal pliosaurs. But it was arguably in the Cretaceous seas that marine reptile diversity and predatory prowess reached its zenith. You find yourself suspended in the sun-dappled waters of a late Cretaceous epicontinental sea, perhaps the same western interior seaway over which pteranodons soared. The water is teeming with life ammonites with their beautifully coiled shells, drift by schools of bony fish, shimmer in the distance, and strange, stalked crinoids wave from the seabed. But this idyllic scene is punctuated by the presence of some truly formidable predators, creatures that made these ancient waters a very dangerous place to swim. Dominating the scene, particularly in the late Cretaceous, is the undisputed marine monarch Mosasaurus. An authoritative fact for you mosasaurs were a group of large predatory marine lizards, closely related to modern monitor lizards and snakes. They were not sea dinosaurs. They evolved from terrestrial or semi-aquatic lizards and rapidly adapted to a fully marine lifestyle during the late Cretaceous, diversifying into a wide array of forms. Mosasaurus hoffmanni, one of the largest and most famous species, could reach lengths of up to 15 to 17 meters, around 50-56 feet, making it one of the largest marine predators of its time, rivaling or even exceeding the size of many modern whales. Imagine a Komodo dragon but scaled up to the length of a bus, with powerful paddle-like limbs, a long muscular fluke-tipped tail for propulsion, and a massive skull filled with conical recurved teeth designed for seizing and holding onto large prey. They also possessed a second set of teeth on their palate, pterygoid teeth, which helped them grip struggling victims and ratchet them down their throats, much like some snakes do today. Mosasaurs were apex predators, feeding on almost anything they could catch: large fish, sharks, ammonites. Their crushed shells are often found in mosasaur stomach contents, seabirds, pterosaurs that ventured too close to the water, and even other smaller marine reptiles. They were the oceanic equivalent of Tyrannosaurus rex, a terrifying combination of power speed and voracious appetite. You watch as a truly enormous specimen effortlessly ambushes a large, unfortunate shark, the water briefly churning in a flurry of teeth and thrashing tail. "Just a light snack," it might have gurgled. "Now where's the main course of plesiosaur?" And speaking of plesiosaurs, they were still very much a part of the Cretaceous marine ecosystem. These long-necked marine reptiles, which had been around since the Jurassic, continued to thrive. The classic plesiosaur body plan involved a broad, turtle-like body, 4 powerful paddle-like flippers used for flying through the water, and that famously long, flexible neck, often tipped with a relatively small head, full of sharp, needle-like teeth, perfect for snatching fish and squid. Species like Elasmosaurus platyurus from the late Cretaceous of North America had an astonishingly long neck, sometimes comprising up to 76 vertebrae. You have a mere 7 in your neck, making up more than half its total body length of around 10-13 meters, 33-43 feet. For a long time, paleontologists debated how flexible these long necks truly were. Could they strike like a snake, or were they more limited in their range of motion? Current thinking suggests they were more likely used for sweeping through schools of fish or exploring crevices in reefs, rather than for snake-like strikes above the water. An odd little fact for you: when the first relatively complete skeleton of Elasmosaurus was discovered and described by the famous paleontologist Edward Drinker Cope in 1868, he initially reconstructed it with its head on the wrong end, on the tip of its short tail rather than its incredibly long neck. His rival Othniel Charles Marsh gleefully pointed out this rather significant error, adding fuel to their infamous Bone Wars rivalry. It was an embarrassing blunder, but understandable given the bizarre and unprecedented proportions of the creature. Imagine trying to assemble a prehistoric IKEA flat-pack plesiosaur with no instructions. While the long-necked plesiosauromorphs, were elegant fish catchers, their short-necked cousins, the plesiosauromorphs, were the true bruisers of the marine reptile world, though their heyday was arguably in the Jurassic. With giants like Liopleurodon, some formidable pliosaurs like Chronosaurus persisted into the early Cretaceous. These were characterized by massive skulls, incredibly powerful jaws, and enormous teeth, adapted for tackling very large prey, including other marine reptiles. Think of them as the killer whales or great white sharks of the Mesozoic seas, but reptilian and arguably even more terrifying. Sharks, of course, were also very much present and accounted for. Ancient sharks like Cretoxyrhina mantelli, often called the Ginsu shark for its incredibly sharp, blade-like teeth, could grow to impressive sizes, perhaps 6 to 8 meters or 20-26 feet, and would have been formidable predators in their own right, competing with, and sometimes falling prey to, the larger marine reptiles. The Cretaceous seas were a multi-tiered arena of predation, with everyone trying to eat everyone else. Historians still debate the hunting strategies and social behaviors of these giant marine reptiles. Were mosasaurs solitary hunters, or did they exhibit cooperative behaviors? How deep could they dive? Did plesiosaurs hunt in groups or alone? Fossil evidence, such as bite marks on bone stomach contents and rare instances of multiple individuals preserved together, provides tantalizing clues, but much about their daily lives remains speculative. What is clear is that they were highly successful and dominated the world's oceans for tens of millions of years. The same Chicxulub impact event that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs and pterosaurs on land and in the air also had a devastating impact on marine ecosystems. The collapse of phytoplankton populations at the base of the marine food web due to the prolonged darkness led to a cascade of extinctions throughout the oceans. The great marine reptiles, the mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, the ichthyosaurs, which had already declined significantly before the end of the Cretaceous, all perished. Their reign was over. The sheer scale and ferocity of these ancient ocean annihilators are difficult to comprehend. Imagine swimming in a sea where a 50-foot marine lizard with a head full of railroad spikes could surge up from the depths at any moment, or where a long-necked creature could snatch you from below without warning. It lends a whole new meaning to the phrase, "don't go in the water." As the Mesozoic era closes the oceans, like the lands are left eerily empty of their giant reptilian rulers, paving the way for a new dynasty of marine megafauna to evolve in the Cenozoic era, the whales. The cataclysmic dust from the Chicxulub impact has settled both literally and metaphorically. The reign of the non-avian dinosaurs and the great marine reptiles is definitively over. You find yourself in a world reborn, the early Paleogene period, the dawn of the Cenozoic era, often called the Age of Mammals. But don't imagine a world suddenly teeming with cute, fluffy bunnies and peacefully grazing deer. Evolution abhors a vacuum, and the extinction of the giant reptilian predators left some very large, very pointy-toothed ecological shoes to fill. And in the immediate aftermath, before mammals truly diversified into large predatory forms, another group of animals stepped up to claim the title of apex terrestrial terror in many parts of the world, the giant flightless birds. You were in a patchy recovering forest, perhaps in Europe or North America, during the Paleocene or Eocene epochs, roughly between 66 and 34 million years ago. The climate is generally warm, even subtropical in many regions. The vegetation is a mix of surviving Mesozoic plants and newly evolving flowering plants. Mammals are indeed diversifying rapidly. Small, shrew-like creatures, early primates exploring the trees, and the ancestors of many modern groups are beginning to appear. But striding through this landscape with an unnerving confidence are creatures that look like they've stepped out of a fever dream inspired by an angry ostrich. These are the terror birds, or Phorus racids, primarily from South America, though their relatives appeared elsewhere. And while the classic terror birds reached their peak later in the Cenozoic and mostly in South America, their earlier, more geographically widespread cousins and ecological equivalents set a fearsome precedent. Imagine a bird standing up to 3 meters, nearly 10 feet tall, with a massive, heavily built skull, a powerful hooked beak, like that of an eagle or a hawk, but on a colossal scale, and strong muscular legs ending in sharp talons. Their wings were small and vestigial, useless for flight, but their legs were built for running, capable of surprising speed. These were not your placid, seed-eating pigeons. These were active, formidable predators. An authoritative fact for you, Gastonis, formerly known as Diatryma in North America, a large, flightless bird from the Paleocene and Eocene of Europe and North America, stood around 1.75 to 2 meters, 5.7 to 6.6 feet tall, and possessed an enormous, robust beak. For a long time, Gastonis was depicted as a ferocious predator, using its massive beak to crush bones and dismember prey, likely early mammals. Its sheer size and formidable appearance certainly lent credence to this idea. It was the stuff of post-dinosaur nightmares. Oh, the big scaly things are gone excellent now about those giant, angry-looking chicken things. An early mammal might have nervously chittered. However, more recent research, including isotopic analysis of its bones and studies of its beak structure and fossilized footprints, has led some paleontologists to reconsider Gastonis's diet. Some now suggest it might have been primarily herbivorous, using its powerful beak to crush tough seeds, nuts and fruits, or perhaps to browse on tough vegetation, similar to some large ground-dwelling parrots today. This is a classic example of how scientific understanding evolves as new evidence and analytical techniques become available. So was Gastornis a terrifying flesh ripper, or just a very large, very intimidating vegan? The jury is still somewhat out, though the herbivorous interpretation has gained considerable traction. Even if Gastornis itself was more of a seed cracker than a mammal muncher, other large flightless birds of the Paleogene were undeniably carnivorous. The true phorusrhacids of South America, which evolved in isolation for much of the Cenozoic, were certainly apex predators. Birds like Phorus rhacos, or the later even larger Kelencan with a skull over 70 centimeters or 28 inches long, the largest known bird skull, were built to hunt. They likely preyed on the unique South American mammal fauna of the time, using their powerful beaks to strike downwards with sledgehammer-like force or to grasp and tear apart smaller victims. Their hunting strategy might have involved a swift chase, followed by a disabling kick with their powerful taloned feet, or a devastating blow from that axe-like beak. An odd little fact for you: the closest living relatives of the terror birds are thought to be the Seriemas, two species of moderately sized long-legged birds found in South America today. Seriemas are known for killing their prey, mostly small animals like rodents, reptiles and large insects, by picking them up in their beaks and slamming them against the ground repeatedly. It's not hard to imagine their giant phorusrhacid ancestors employing a similar, albeit much more writ large and terrifying technique on larger prey. The rise of these giant predatory birds in the early Cenozoic is a fascinating example of convergent evolution and ecological opportunism. With the large theropod dinosaurs gone, the niche of large terrestrial predator was up for grabs. Birds, being the direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs, already possessed many of the necessary adaptations: bipedalism, sharp beaks, keen eyesight. Some lineages simply scaled up, lost the power of flight, which is energetically expensive to maintain, and respecialized as ground-based hunters. Historians still debate the extent of competition between these early Cenozoic predatory birds and the diversifying predatory mammals, as mammals like creodonts, an extinct group of carnivorous mammals, and early carnivorans, the group that includes modern cats, dogs, bears, etc., began to evolve larger body sizes and more sophisticated predatory adaptations. Did they gradually outcompete the terror birds in regions where their ranges overlapped? In South America, which was an island continent for much of the Cenozoic, the phorusrhacids reigned supreme for millions of years, until the formation of the Isthmus of Panama allowed for the Great American Biotic Interchange, bringing new mammalian predators like saber-toothed cats and canids south, and eventually leading to the decline and extinction of most terror bird lineages. While these giant birds were stalking the land, other predators were also emerging. In the water, early whales were evolving from terrestrial hoofed mammal ancestors, gradually adapting to an aquatic lifestyle. And on land, besides the birds, the first significant mammalian carnivores were beginning to make their presence felt. These weren't yet the sleek saber-tooths or powerful direwolves of later epochs, but creatures like the creodonts, animals such as Hyaenodon or Sarcastodon, what a wonderfully evocative name, which had powerful jaws and shearing teeth, but perhaps less specialized brains and limb structures compared to later carnivorans. The world of the early Paleogene was a strange and dynamic transitional period. The echoes of the dinosaur era were still present in these giant flightless avian predators, while the seeds of the modern mammalian faunas were being sown. It was a time of evolutionary experimentation where different groups vied for dominance in a world recovering from catastrophe. The sight of a 10-foot-tall bird with a head like a pickaxe charging across an open plain would certainly have been enough to convince any small, scurrying mammal that the age of monsters was far from over. The post-dinosaur pounce was very real, and it often came on two very large, very fast, and very dangerous bird legs. The era of the giant flightless terror birds, while certainly memorable, and undoubtedly perilous for any smaller contemporary creatures, gradually gives way as the Cenozoic era progresses. The mammals, those furry little opportunists who spent much of the Mesozoic scurrying in the shadows of dinosaurs, are now truly coming into their own. They are diversifying at an explosive rate, filling a vast array of ecological niches, and crucially for our narrative, evolving into some truly formidable predators. You find yourself now in the heart of the Cenozoic, perhaps the Oligocene, Miocene or Pliocene epochs, a vast stretch of time from roughly 34 million down to about 2.6 million years ago. The continents are approaching their modern positions, mountain ranges are rising and grasslands are spreading, creating new habitats and new evolutionary pressures. And in these evolving landscapes, a new caste of mammalian carnivores takes center stage, equipped with powerful jaws, sharp teeth, keen senses, and increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies. These are the true carnassial confronters, masters of the mammalian bite. You are witnessing the rise of the orders Carnivora, which includes cats, dogs, bears, hyenas, seals, and their relatives, and the now extinct Creodonta, both of which produced some truly terrifying apex predators. Imagine the open woodlands and grasslands of North America or Eurasia during the Miocene. You might encounter the entelodonts, often dubbed hell pigs or terminator pigs, though they were not true pigs but a distinct family of artiodactyls, even-toed hoofed mammals that evolved a terrifyingly carnivorous lifestyle. An authoritative fact for you, entelodonts like Daedon, formerly Dinohaeus, meaning terrible pig, were massive, powerfully built animals standing up to 2.1 meters, 7 feet tall at the shoulder, and weighing perhaps 900 kilograms, nearly a ton. They had enormous elongated skulls up to a meter long with prominent bony bosses or tubercles on their jaws and cheekbones, the function of which is debated, perhaps for display or for reinforcing the skull during aggressive encounters with rivals or prey. Their jaws were incredibly powerful, armed with large canines and robust, crushing molars, suggesting they were opportunistic omnivores that could hunt large prey-scavenged carcasses and possibly even crush bones. They were the Cenozoic equivalent of a walking garbage disposal unit with a very bad attitude and the muscle to back it up. Is that a freshly deceased Meropus I smell? Don't mind if I do, and if it's not quite deceased yet, well, I can help with that. Then there were the creodonts, such as Hyenodon, a widespread and successful genus that persisted for millions of years. Hyenodon species varied in size from small weasel-like forms to giant bear-sized predators like Hyenodon gigas. They possessed long skulls and powerful jaws with teeth specialized for shearing flesh, but their brains were relatively smaller and their limb structure somewhat less adapted for fast running compared to many modern carnivorans. They were nonetheless highly effective predators in their time, hunting the diverse array of herbivorous mammals that populated the Cenozoic landscapes. But it is perhaps within the order Carnivora that some of the most iconic and formidable Cenozoic predators arose. The feliforms cat-like carnivorans and caniforms dog-like carnivorans embarked on their own evolutionary arms races. Among the feliforms, the nimravids, or false saber-tooths, appeared early in the Cenozoic, evolving long flattened canine teeth independently of the true felid saber-tooths. And then came the true felids, the cat family, which produced a spectacular array of predators, including, most famously, the Machairodontines, the true saber-toothed cats. Genera like Smilodon, the classic saber-toothed tiger. Though not a true tiger from the Pleistocene of the Americas, or earlier forms like Machairodus or Homotherium, are legendary for their enormously elongated, blade-like upper canine teeth. These teeth were not for simply biting and holding like those of modern conical-toothed cats like lions or tigers. Instead, they were likely used for a specialized killing bite, delivered with precision to the throat or soft underbelly of large, thick-skinned prey, like mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, or bison. Smilodon fatalis, for example, was a powerfully built cat more robust and muscular than a modern lion, with relatively short, strong limbs. It was likely an ambush predator using its immense strength to wrestle large prey to the ground before delivering that fatal slicing bite with its sabers. Imagine the sheer terror of being confronted by a cat the size of a lion, but built like a grizzly bear with 8-inch steak knives permanently attached to its upper jaw. An odd little fact for you: despite their fearsome appearance, those impressive sabers were actually quite delicate and prone to breakage if they hit bone or if the prey struggled too violently. This suggests Smilodon had to be very precise in its killing technique, subduing its victim effectively before attempting the saber strike. It wasn't just brute force, there was a deadly art to it. Among the caniforms, the amphicyonids, or bear dogs, were a diverse and successful group that flourished for millions of years. As their common name suggests, they combined features of both bears and dogs with robust bodies, powerful jaws and feet adapted for both walking on the soles, plantigrade, like bears, and on the toes, digitigrade, like dogs to varying degrees. Some species of amphitryon were enormous, rivaling the largest modern bears in size, and were likely apex predators capable of hunting large ungulates. And of course, true canids dogs and their relatives and ursids bears were also evolving, producing their own impressive predators, though perhaps not always as overtly monstrous in appearance as the entelodonts or saber-tooths. Early dogs were often smaller, more agile pursuit hunters, while early bears diversified into various omnivorous and carnivorous niches. Historians still debate the hunting behaviors and social structures of many of these extinct Cenozoic carnivores. Were entelodonts solitary scavengers, or did they move in aggressive family groups? Did all saber-toothed cats hunt in prides like modern lions? Or were some solitary fossil trackways, bone accumulations, and comparative anatomy provide clues? But definitively, reconstructing the behavior of long-extinct animals is always a challenging endeavor. The Cenozoic was a dynamic and dangerous time, a period when mammals truly stepped into the roles of both mega-herbivore and mega-predator. The carnassial confrontation was in full swing, with an ever-evolving array of teeth, claws, speed, strength, and cunning being deployed in the relentless struggle for survival. The landscapes might have started to look a little more familiar, with grasslands spreading and the ancestors of modern animals appearing, but the predators were often larger, stranger, and arguably more terrifying than many we know today. The age of giant reptiles was over, but the age of monstrous mammals was just hitting its stride, creating a whole new suite of prehistoric perils for anything unfortunate enough to be on their menu. The long winding road of prehistoric peril, from the primordial soup to the age of monstrous mammals, now leads us to its final and in many ways most familiar chapter, the Ice Age. Officially known as the Pleistocene epoch, this period began about 2.6 million years ago and ended relatively recently, around 11,700 years ago, with the close of the last glacial period. This was a time of dramatic climatic fluctuations, with repeated cycles of advancing and retreating continental ice sheets, particularly in the northern hemisphere. These glacial cycles profoundly reshaped landscapes, altered sea levels, and created unique, often harsh environments that fostered the evolution of a spectacular and specialized megafauna, and the predators that hunted them. And for the first time in our long journey, another formidable predator was making its presence increasingly and decisively felt on a global scale: Homo sapiens, humans. You find yourself on a vast windswept steppe tundra, perhaps in Ice Age Europe or North America. The air is bitingly cold, and a persistent wind whips across the frozen plains. In the distance, massive glaciers gleam under a pale sun. The vegetation is sparse: hardy grasses, sedges, and low-growing shrubs. But this seemingly desolate landscape is teeming with life, with herds of woolly mammoths, their shaggy coats protecting them from the cold, their enormous tusks sweeping aside snow to find buried vegetation. Woolly rhinoceroses, giant Irish elk with their colossal antlers, herds of bison and wild horses also roam these plains. This was the mammoth steppe, a rich and productive ecosystem despite the harsh conditions. And where there are such abundant large herbivores, there are inevitably formidable carnivores adapted to hunt them in these challenging environments, you see a pack of them now moving with a coordinated, purposeful grace across the frozen ground, dire wolves, Enochiandirus. An authoritative fact for you, the dire wolf, while often depicted as simply a larger, more robust version of the modern grey wolf, was a distinct species. It was heavier boned than the grey wolf, with a larger head and more powerful jaws and teeth, suggesting it was specialized for taking down and processing the carcasses of large megafauna. Fossil evidence shows they were widespread across North and South America during the Pleistocene. They were built for endurance and power, true denizens of the Ice Age. Another day, another 1,000-pound bison to bring down. Just a typical Tuesday on the tundra, one might have howled to its packmates, its breath misting in the frigid air. But the dire wolf was not the only or even the largest carnivore on the block. Looming even larger was the short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. This was an enormous predator, one of the largest terrestrial mammalian carnivores ever to have lived. Standing on its hind legs, it could have reached heights of 3.4 to 7 meters, 11 to 12 feet, and it weighed an estimated 900 kilograms, nearly 2,000 pounds or more. It had proportionally longer legs than modern bears, suggesting it was a more capable runner, and its short face, or broad muzzle, housed powerful jaw muscles. For a long time, it was thought to be a super predator, running down and killing large prey. However, more recent isotopic studies of its bones have suggested that it may have been more of a specialized scavenger or kleptoparasite, using its immense size and intimidating presence to drive other predators like dire wolves or saber-toothed cats off their kills. Imagine a 12-foot-tall, 1-ton bear casually strolling up and saying, "Excuse me, I believe that freshly killed mammoth is mine now. Any objections?" Few would have argued. And yes, the saber-toothed cats, like Smilodon fatalis in the Americas, were still very much a part of this Ice Age menagerie of peril, their specialized killing technique perfectly suited for tackling the large, thick-hided herbivores of the time. Lions, too, were present, including the impressive cave lion Panthera spelaea in Eurasia and Beringia, larger than modern African lions and adapted to colder climates. Hyenas, like the cave hyena, Crocuta spelaea, also roamed these landscapes, efficient hunters and scavengers. It was a veritable all-star cast of Cenozoic carnivores, all adapted to the unique challenges and opportunities of the Ice Age world. An odd little fact for you, the Irish elk, Megaloceros giganteus, despite its common name, was neither exclusively Irish. It ranged across Eurasia, nor an elk. It was a giant deer. Its most striking feature was its enormous antlers, which could span up to 3.6 meters, 12 feet from tip to tip, and weigh up to 40 kilograms, 90 pounds. These were the largest antlers of any known deer and likely served primarily for display and ritualized combat between males, though they would have also been a cumbersome burden. And then there were humans. Our ancestors and anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, were spreading across the globe throughout the Pleistocene. Initially, they were just another component of the ecosystem, hunting and being hunted. But with their developing intelligence, sophisticated tool use like spears, atlatls, and eventually bows and arrows, complex social structures, and mastery of fire, humans became increasingly effective predators, capable of tackling even the largest and most dangerous megafauna. The development of cooperative hunting strategies allowed small groups of humans to bring down mammoths, bison, and other formidable beasts. We were in effect the new apex predator on the block, and our impact was profound. Historians still debate the exact role humans played in the Quaternary extinction event, which saw the disappearance of most of the world's large terrestrial mammals, megafauna, at the end of the Pleistocene. Was it primarily due to climate change as the ice sheets retreated and habitats shifted dramatically, or was it overkill by increasingly efficient human hunters? This is often referred to as the climate change versus overkill hypothesis. The truth is likely a complex interplay of both factors, with human hunting pressure perhaps delivering the final blow to populations already stressed by rapid environmental changes. It's a sobering thought our own species, in its relentless drive to survive and expand, may have contributed significantly to the extinction of so many magnificent creatures. The Ice Age therefore represents a unique period of prehistoric peril. It featured a spectacular cast of giant mammalian carnivores perfectly adapted to a harsh and unforgiving world. But it also saw the rise of a new kind of predator, one whose intelligence and adaptability would ultimately allow it to outcompete and reshape the global ecosystem in ways no other single species had ever done before. The instincts ignited during this brutal epoch, to hunt, to survive, to adapt, are a fundamental part of our own human story. As the ice retreats and the megafauna vanish, the world begins to look much more like the one we know today, but the echoes of these ancient dangers, these primeval struggles, still resonate within us, a faint, primal whisper from a time when survival was a daily and often terrifying battle. And so our long, sleepy journey through the eons of prehistoric peril, from the first flickers of life in ancient seas to the icy battlegrounds of the Pleistocene, draws to its close. We have drifted through oceans ruled by monstrous arthropods and armored fish, navigated forests stalked by colossal insects and sail-backed synapsids, and trembled before the earth-shaking tread of dinosaurs and the terrifying charge of saber-toothed cats. We've seen life's incredible resilience, its constant innovation in the face of unimaginable challenges, and its capacity to produce creatures of both breathtaking beauty and terrifying ferocity. The shadows of Anomalocaris in the Cambrian dawn, the crushing jaws of Dunkleosteus in the Devonian depths, the sheer predatory majesty of Tyrannosaurus rex ruling the Cretaceous, and the cunning of a dire wolf pack coordinating a hunt across the frozen mammoth steppe. These images, these echoes of ancient lives and ancient dangers, remind us of the immense, almost incomprehensible tapestry of life that has unfolded on this planet. Each creature, a masterpiece of adaptation, played its part in a grand, often brutal, ecological drama that stretched across hundreds of millions of years, a drama whose final act is still being written. The world outside your window now is for the most part a tamer place, the monsters largely relegated to myth, legend, and the fossil record. Yet the legacy of that ancient peril, that relentless struggle for survival, is woven into the very fabric of life today, into our own DNA, into the instincts that still flicker within us. As you drift off to sleep, perhaps you can feel a faint, ancestral tremor, a whisper of the wildness that once was a reminder that the journey of life has been long, arduous, and filled with wonders beyond imagining. The night is calm now, the true prehistoric beasts are safely locked away in the stone of ages past, and you can rest, knowing their roars are but gentle rumbles in the deep, deep archives of time.